My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Flex your business with an American Express Business Gold Card. You'll earn 4 times membership rewards points on your top 2 eligible spending categories, like transit and electronics, each month, on up to $150K in combined purchases per year. Plus, you can now earn 3 times membership rewards points on flights and prepaid hotels booked on AmexTravel.com. Terms and points cap apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-gold. Amex Business Gold, built for business by American Express.
Hold on to your butts.
We are changing the course of history as we see it. That is what Western demands.
Now, this affects Iris. Iris, where are you?
What you feel only matters to you. I do not entertain hypotheticals. The world as it is vexing enough.
Iris, I have a tip for you.
Don't take drugs!
Or Whatever Movies with Wesley and Iris.
What up, and welcome to Or Whatever Movies. I'm your co-host, Iris, and I'm here with my older brother,
Wesley.
Today we're talking Academy Award Best Picture nominee, Nickel Boys.
And we're going to start this discussion today with a quiz. Iris, ready, go. What is the full name of Los Angeles?
The City of Angels?
No.
I don't know.
The full name of the city of Los Angeles en español is El Pueblo de Nuestra Señora, la Reina de Los Ángeles del Río Porciúncula. Do you know the full title of the movie Precious? Did you see Precious?
Yeah, Precious by the novel from Sapphire or something?
Right. Precious, based on the novel Push by Sapphire. Or simply titled Precious. I think the title Nickel Boys is actually short for Nickel Boys, based on the novel The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead, which forces us to examine art in movie making.
Loosely based on an actual school called something Academy?
The point, though, was that it was called a school when it was obviously a reformatory and basically a torture murder prison.
Where abuses took place, and including sexual abuse.
Okay. So obviously we don't want to downplay that. That's an important historical aspect of this story. Maybe not as it's being presented to us, but certainly not deliberately excluded. So Elwood Curtis, who we watch from the early POV perspective as he grows to adulthood, is also a little bit based on our filmmaker, director, co-writer, Ramel Ross. This is his historical perspective played out, I assume, like he perceives memories of his childhood in not a reformatory school, but in the South, how he recalls events of his growing up that he translates to Elwood Curtis. But he is going to make us see it like he imagines he would have seen it were he the Elwood Curtis character.
Okay, so is that what you take from the first-person POV perspective?
Yeah, so there are movies that Kelly Ray hasn't seen. You know she's never seen The Blair Witch Project. She's only seen a little bit of Cloverfield. She did get through Paranormal Activity, but didn't see Paranormal Activity 2. Because those were shaky cam films, aside from the fact that they're horror films, kind of. And who would have thought that Nickel Boys would be a shaky cam, unpleasant for her, make her feel kind of sick, motion-y film?
But none of those films that you mentioned were first-person POV films. Nope. Is there a pure POV film? Is this going to be the new one-shot camera fad?
Oh, goodness. No, do I hope not. So there was a Hardcore Henry film, which was meant by created by a stunt coordinator. And that was like John Wick, but from an entirely first-person perspective, a.k.a. a video game. Oh, my gosh, so much like a video game. There was another film that Ramel Ross discussed ad nauseum, because this kind of extreme filmmaking, I dare say, obviously invites comparison to anything like it. Blair Witch Project sort of created the found footage genre, of which Paranormal Activity is a part, and there have been lots since because it's a cheap way to shoot on film. Nickel Boys still feels original to me because no one, I don't think, took Hardcore Henry seriously. But this was a new experience for me. And we were watching it, and I was like, oh, it's really cute that he looks up through the pine needles of the Christmas tree to his mom dangling the thing. And that's such a memory of childhood remember what the perspective from childhood is, where you're looking up at people. And that's so interesting. And you're seeing extreme close-ups of the party and the finery of the party guests and stuff. And I was like, this is interesting. And Kelly's like, okay, first person POV is interesting for a little bit, but not an entire movie. Like, it's not all going to be like this, right? And I was like, I don't think so. And then it was.
Yeah. I wonder, I'd be interested to hear from our listeners at what point in the Nickel Boys viewing experience did you ask yourself or someone else, you think it's going to be like this the whole time?
And the perspective shouts at us. You can't get away from it. It's so consistent. It's kind of what you have to talk about first.
Brian had read the screenplay, so he quickly assured me, yep, it's going to be like this the whole time. I was like, really? Because I asked pretty early. So I girded myself and prepared for the next 2.5 hours of being confined to these perspectives.
Confined, a good word. Interesting.
Yeah, because it does feel like you were just talking about Paranormal Activity. Obviously, the found footage shaky cam format is often first-person POV because it's the POV of a person taking video. And it works because in the horror genre, you want that feeling of claustrophobia or being confined or having limited perspective is what makes the whole thing scarier. Was this supposed to be scary?
There were definitely elements, and I will argue to my dying day that the associations with Night of the Living Dead were intentional. When they're out in the field and that those trucks drive by and the truck is dragging the cross and there's that eerie sort of space music, I was like, that is right out of Night of the Living Dead. And the kind of shaky first camera lurchy zombie perspective didn't help any.
And so it takes those slices of life moments like the tinsel raining on you under the Christmas tree, or looking up at the sun shine through the leaves, or watching your grandma seemingly talk to herself while she cuts and serves cake. It makes all of that feel eerie. But was that the intention, or were those supposed to be slices of life that gave us a perspective of what kind of normal boy Elwood was like?
My gut instinct is that it was forcing us to, like I said, examine art. It was forcing us to see these things in a way that it didn't care if it was going to be unsettling. Cameras don't flinch, and it wasn't going to flinch away from these hard stares at us. It was a trick that Anthony Hopkins employed in The Silence of the Lambs, where he's looking right down the barrel of the camera. It's breaking the fourth wall, and he did it because Hannibal Lecter is unsettling, and constantly being looked right in the eye is unsettling and kind of unpleasant. And that's why I was suggesting that we had no choice but to look.
So this is a hard story, and this is an important story, but it's also a distant story in the sense that it's very specific. It's from a different time period, and it's from a uniquely Black American experience perspective. So for me personally, pretty removed. And for maybe a lot of people, which seemed to suggest to me that maybe this was our director Ramel Ross's tactic to put us in the shoes and therefore in the experience of someone that we wouldn't otherwise be readily able to relate to.
And to do that, you would think that this position, putting us in the shoes, I guess quite literally, and seeing the world through the eyes of a certain person, means that it's significant, that it's important, that this person has something to say or has important things said to them, and that the experience will be dramatic, right? And it made me wonder, if you're a Southern person, a Southern person of color, even of a certain age, who lived through the mid-60s and however we went through the years, the decades to get kind of to the end of the film, is it important? Is it a little bit boring if that's how you grew up? Are people interested in hearing about Southern California and the South Bay in the 90s and early aughts for us growing up? Because, of course, that's a unique perspective to the entirety of the rest of the world. But to us, it doesn't seem dramatic or justified to make a movie about it. So it brought up this idea of this subjective aesthetic. It's interesting for a certain amount of time, but then I wondered if it was maybe a little bit too force-feedy. Was watching her talk to herself and these long extended shots and views of shoes and minutia, is it important? Watching the twine around Elwood's finger and stuff.
It's certainly important to Ramel Ross. I think it would be important to people of that time period, people who have direct connections to this story. But what makes it truly important is its universal themes, that a boy with so much promise and so much potential met such systematic injustice and abuse. This idea of a wasted life, wasted potential, it's just heart-wrenching, and I think it's the universal themes and how it kind of applies broadly that make it important. That being said, this is a little-known story of injustice that needs to be brought out of the dark and into the light. That these schools, these academies, institutions existed across the nation. It's scary. It's like, if I'm going to relate from a personal perspective, it's like saying, of course, the Japanese-American internment during World War II is important because people don't know about it, and they need to know about it so that it doesn't happen again.
That seems like cultural responsibility in storytelling or promoting awareness. It sounds like you're saying, yes, that it is important that this story be told for perspective other than our own, from a first-person perspective. And I'd said in The Brutalist that for all the uniqueness, let's go with, for the presentation of that film, I still saw things that I would never see. There were extraordinary images that it worked to be unsettling to see in Nickel Boys. That white dude poking the black kids in the belly with his cane, all aggressive.
Was that?
It was so, he was just like, I generally disapprove of your existence and your physical stature, you punk-ass young black kids. I'm having none of it. Now you'll excuse me while I step off the curb, assisted by this white police officer who condones my behavior to my car. It's so weird, man. So
bizarre. And the hand of the second body was like, don't poke me there. And it's like, yeah, why is he poking them? I thought that he was like assessing them in this weird slaver kind of way. Like
it did feel like that, just generally sussing, like examining you, and you come up wanting. It's so weird. And it was uncomfortable. And I'm sure that they equally had no idea. But this old dude was going to be tolerated and supported by the cop, who would have immediately pounced on them if they'd knocked away his cane or whatever,
Yeah.
In that way, those intimate things really worked. Being John Malkovich, first-person perspective, occasionally worked because they were a little bit fewer and farther between. So that this subjective aesthetic thing that I was talking about was meant to be real, and we were supposed to feel it when he's tapping us in the belly with the cane. And maybe it was too real. Like, the artistry is the sort of visceral visual imperfection. Like, we're locked into the pan, or we're panning left or panning right or panning down, and we're limited by the frame of what we're seeing on screen. And I think the irony of that is it felt fake to me. For all the realness, it was like nobody watches their life through binoculars. When we run or we're walking, we're not visually restricted to an aspect ratio, whatever this was, 16:9 or whatever. Our brains stabilize automatically. Like, the shaky cam at 24 frames per second doesn't feel like real walking or running. It's how the medium presents it, and to me it felt way more fake than real.
When you say fake, I think what you mean is, like in that cane pokey scene in particular, the action raises more questions than it answers. And though it was evocative of a feeling where you're uncomfortable and maybe like the boys who are getting poked in the stomach confused, ultimately it's unsatisfying from a storytelling perspective. And that's why I think sticking with this first-person POV so consistently, even when we toggle between Turner and Elwood, it really does limit the storytelling ability. And so the other factor I was considering is that the POV gimmick is the wrong word. Device, that the POV device was potentially just in service of hiding the fact that old Elwood is not Elwood, that he's in fact Turner. So could that have been like the sole motivation, and they just thought, and it would be interesting to tell the whole story through this perspective?
Not enough. To reveal that Elwood was not Elwood, but was in fact Turner by the end with a different hairstyle, not enough to justify it. Boy, I hope that wasn't the case. But it wasn't just the POV perspective, because you can argue that the mounted to his back, behind the head, conspicuously can't see his face, or actually not conspicuously. I wasn't looking for tricks. I wasn't looking for the twist, right? That maybe that's not him, and maybe that's why we're not seeing his face. It was like he turned his back on us. We were on the outside, and what was supposed to be a perspective was kind of the whole time the undercurrent was that it was a cheat. Also, it didn't feel good. It didn't feel real or intimate. And it felt like we were on the outside of those conversations. And I found that really frustrating in a way that the twist couldn't possibly have justified all those means. But it wasn't the only device. Nothing takes me out of a movie more than when it goes to black and you are suddenly slammed back to reality that you're watching a movie in a dark room and you're keenly aware of everyone around you. And you're not in the movie anymore. And the movie cut to black at least twice, where I was like, oh, they did that thing again.
Even when they cut to some photos and some movies and stuff like that, it took me out. POV is such a dominant force in Nickel Boys. We could talk about it the entire episode. But I think there's other stuff to talk about too. I think suffice it to say that all the things that we gain from this unique first-person POV, like these feelings of claustrophobia or a very evocative perspective when it came to the slices of life and the minutia, putting us in the character's shoes, cleverly hiding the fact that there was an identity switch. Like all of these things that we gain, I think are not worth the ultimate price that Nickel Boys pays. And that is the cardinal filmmaking sin in my book. It's not worth confusing your audience. And I was confused for a lot of this movie. And it took me so much brain power just to figure out what was going on. I couldn't get immersed in the movie.
It's too frustrating, huh? You were like a donkey in the hallway. You were like an alligator in the classroom. The movie did everything in its power, its considerable arsenal, to try to disengage me. And I cannot help but react to that from a subjective perspective. And I didn't know if it was just me. I didn't know if I had a hang up with the way this was portrayed and Kelly was fighting against it because of the motion sicknessy that she may have experienced.
And white privilege.
But there were lots of sighs coming from next to me, and it made 2 hours 20 runtime feel like an eternity. And that's why I said it forces us to examine art. So sticking with subjectivity for a minute, I have this thing, and Kelly Ray is rolling her eyes as she listens to this. I have this thing with wheels on cars. The hubcaps or the rims or whatever, not the tires, but the wheels. You with me?
Yep.
You've seen these ones where it's like a pinwheel, where the pattern is suggested that the airflow would warp the shape. So they're not spokes sticking straight up and down. It's like a whorl pattern with a W, with an O, a whorl, like a pinwheel. Yeah. And when the whorl wheels happen, it turns in such a way as to suggest that the wind resistance on the design, that it flows harmoniously.
You like these wheels?
Well, I like the wheels where naturally it feels aesthetically pleasing and appropriate. When the wheels turn, it turns like a pinwheel in the wind, as opposed to the crazy people who mount the wheels facing the opposite direction so that it's a really aggressive, it's like a buzzsaw. It's like the wheels are turning against nature the wrong way. Does this make sense at all?
Do people do that? And what does it sound like?
100% it doesn't sound like anything. Those wheels, despite the fact that they look wrong, it doesn't really affect the efficiency of energy to drive the car. It just looks stupid and it makes me mad. And every time I see the wheels, I was like, those wheels are on backward. I'm like, those wheels are on backwards. And finally, Kelly Ray was like, I get it. Shut up. I don't care about the wheels. And I realized that I was laboring under this sort of discomfort, that the wheels are aesthetically wrong to me. And I felt like watching Nickel Boys, I was like, I'm taken out of it too much. It's bugging me. The choices that they made and that they felt like they could stick to. And to what Kelly was saying, if they did that at first, and then when we get to adult Elwood, then we're in a different place and we can present it differently, they could have switched. And they did switch. They switched to the weird, like half body shot, like the mounted to the back. They shifted perspectives between Elwood and Turner. They could and did change it up, but not enough for it to land in a comfortable place for me. And when I'm examining this movie from a place of constant discomfort, how are you not going to, knock it down a couple of ticks? Everything we're saying can be immediately summarized in a 5-word blurb. Have you read the IMDb user reviews? So the one that I saw was just like, it was like, good movie, interesting story, horribly told. And I really like that. And I hate that we can take what is ostensibly important subject matter about potentially a real school where stuff like this horrible stuff happened. A lot of symbolism in this movie. The double-sided penny, isn't that double bad luck for that coin?
Yeah.
Every time we saw something beautiful, then it was changed. The really cool dude and the nice car, and then the cop just dehumanizes him and grabs his ear, and he's reduced to like a groveling before him kind of thing. He just subjugated him. He was so demeaned, and it was made ugly in a way that I thought coincided with the presentation of this movie, but I don't think that was the intention. I think the intention was beauty. And I was like, dude, you're doing it wrong.
I get it. Yeah. The message came through loud and clear. The deck was stacked against this kid who had every right in a free country for the opportunity to succeed. He was bright. He was kind, if not timid, sensitive kid who had an innate sense of self-respect and a desire for justice. He was just a good kid.
So it sounds like you did find some room to empathize with Elwood.
Sure, yeah. I think because of the story itself and the way that he gets to that field running for his life when he's gunned down is just unbearably tragic. He picked the wrong car. He picked the wrong time to stand up for a friend. He was going to be murdered because he wanted to shed light on abuse and injustice. He didn't do anything wrong. I got that. So why am I so frustrated?
Well, I think that because of the way that it was presented, which we've talked about ad nauseum. But so I got an Amber Alert today from all the way from Fresno, which is kind of middle California, down all the way down to San Diego and to the border. And it's because this person abducted his kids. At least they shared the same last name. And they believe that he would be headed for Mexico. And I was like, oh, that's terrible. But also, there's only one thoroughfare between here and there. Go put people all along the 5 freeway, because that's really the only way to get to Mexico from Fresno.
Yeah.
If you are running from a slave plantation, let us say, you know what you don't do to successfully get away? You don't take your stuff.
Ride a bike in the daylight down the main road.
Down the main road. You cut through the fields. You go across country. Talk about wrong place, wrong time, or him doing the wrong thing, standing up for the person at the wrong time, escaping the wrong way. It wasn't his. You can't say that it wasn't his fault in a way.
Seemed to work for Turner, though. Wasn't it a wonder that he got away?
That Turner got away, I guess, but we needed a lone survivor to tell the tale. So, we're getting into story finally. Does Turner taking Elwood's name, because that lady was right next to him and called him Elwood when he was looking at the computer screen, right?
Yeah. But did you notice that when Chicky Pete comes to the bar, he doesn't call him Elwood?
No, because I was so firmly, that's obviously Elwood, and then it wasn't. But did Turner, the survivor of Nichols' school, take Elwood's name to honor him or whatever? He took a dead boy's name. And was the question as to whether or not he would show up as a survivor of the school in response to them, like digging up all the bodies and stuff? Was that because his hesitance? Was that because he would expose himself as such?
It crossed my mind, but it's a little bit of a leap to say that Turner took Elwood's name to honor his friend, his fallen friend. What his motivations were are unclear. And his motivation certainly wouldn't have been to conceal his identity so as to escape the reach of the Nickel Academy, because obviously Elwood was a kid there too. Like, if he's trying to get away from the academy, like, you don't do that by assuming another Academy kid's name. It also seemed like assuming Elwood's identity was symbolic of Turner's second lease on life. It's funny, when I saw the context, the life surrounding the older Elwood, I was like, this is the illustration of wasted potential. Like, Elwood wouldn't have been a mover. But then I found out he has a moving business. So it's like, okay, like, that's totally respectable. But then there was kind of part of me that was like, okay, maybe that does seem more kind of apropos to Turner. But was it symbolic of him saying, I've got a new lease on life and I'm going to get my act together? Because he was the flunky type, right? Who kind of knew how to navigate Nickel Academy and helped Elwood do that in exchange for having a real friendship with a kid who actually had some substance.
So you're saying it wasn't out of the blue, that we were being given hints that maybe it wasn't Elwood?
I mean, I certainly thought right off the bat, like, this isn't what a bright kid like Elwood would have done. And I thought it was the Nickel Academy's doing that he was kind of in his position. But I think anybody who goes through that kind of trauma is going to be stunted. And the fact that Turner did what he did do, the fact that Turner was not just a survivor but a thriver, is a testament to his character and to the legacy of Elwood.
So I watched a number of interviews with Ramel Ross. He's very self-possessed. He's not trying to maintain this hustle or to pretend to be someone he's not. He's super open. And so it was an intentional choice that I don't think was meant to be deceptive, except for the necessary deception to sell this twist at the end. I just think it was an experiment that didn't really land for me to justify awards consideration. The artificiality masking as an organic feel, where it's meant to be natural through someone else's eyes, all felt fake to me. And there was a lot besides that was confusing that took me out of this movie. The Houdini guy tied up on the rope, upside down and on fire, that was confusing.
Yeah, the rope was on fire, so obviously it was going to fall on his head.
And obviously there's racial stuff in the South.
Why does she say he's going to be all right, he's all right?
I'm not sure. You put things in that feel confusing, but maybe they're deeper. Maybe we just didn't get it, bruh. What nobody is going to get ever was the worst choreographed boxing match I've ever seen. Like, those weren't even kind of punches they were throwing. So even within our limited narrative perspective, the first person point of view, it didn't feel right. Sorry, some of the acting was flat for me. It was almost like AI. They should have made it as real as possible, because it wasn't, we're doing this because it's cheap, like the Blair Witch Project, and we're pointing a camera this way. There were multiple shots where we are looking at a reflection where we should be seeing the camera, where instead we're seeing Elwood, or instead we're seeing Turner, or whatever perspective we're supposed to be in. That's a lot of effort to maintain this illusion for it not to work ultimately in the end.
This is an important story, a personal story, earnestly told and to the best of their ability. And over the course of this perspective, I feel like there was enough felt from this film to discuss that's important, and to show that I was moved. And yet I cannot shake the just ultimately frustrating experience of viewing, of consuming this material, of consuming this film.
It was just so outside conventional movie making. That forced intimacy was so bizarre. I felt like we were 1,000 miles away from Turner's perspective, who was running for his life and didn't get to land on the emotional beat of his friend dying while trying to escape. I felt continually at a distance, forcibly so, from Nickel Boys, so that while I understand the importance and I do feel I can recognize the dramatic intricacies of the story, I was never in there. I was never in those people in such a way that I think that the filmmakers intended.
Yeah.
Now, I'm giving this movie an explorer rating. So it was not a grub. That's you. Is not a grub because there was determination and deliberateness behind the filmmaking, but this wasn't a pioneer movie, and it certainly wasn't an ace movie as much as it tried. And explorers don't have to be successful to bear that label. They don't have to actually discover. They're not discoverers. They're just exploring.
That's a pretty gracious way to put it. I'll join you for an explorer rating of Nickel Boys and the rest of the Academy Award nominated Best Pictures, or orwhatevermovies.com, or wherever you get podcasts. 818-835-0473 or whatevermovies@gmail.com is how you get in touch. Thank you for listening, and happy award season.
Hi everyone, I'm Geraldine Glass, a leader in the field of music as medicine, and I'm excited to share with you my newest release of healing sound, Pentatonic Visions, with Chris Scholler and Electrocast Records. Immerse yourself in ethereal realms where the harmonies of nature, tribal rhythms, and soundscapes blend with the crystal singing bowls. It's out now, streaming on all platforms.
Everyone has heard about the U.S. space program, but what is actually going on at NASA? Get the real story in 4 minutes or less with the NASA Daily Podcast from Electrocast. Join astronauts and researchers as they conduct groundbreaking experiments, work on the International Space Station, and reach for the stars. NASA Daily, your cosmic update.
Electrocast. Electrocast.